40,000 years ago. You could walk across Europe and bump into at least 3 different kinds of humans, and not a single one would look just like you. Now, every human on Earth is the same species, and every one of our ancient cousins is gone. What really happened to the others? Was it murder, misfortune, or something far stranger? Almost everyone thinks modern humans won because we were simply smarter or stronger.
But new evidence says the real answer is weirder and much less flattering.
The truth is, we didn't just outthink or outfight our relatives. We outlasted them. By accident, by adaptation, and by a risky habit that could have wiped us out too. But before we get to that risky habit, let's rewind. Picture a world where human meant something plural. Europe and Asia were Neanderthal territory, tough and cold, with mammoths thundering through snowy plains. Denisovans, the mysterious cousins, thrived in Asia's mountains, their DNA still echoing in some modern humans. And then came us, Homo sapiens, spindlier, more social, and arguably more annoying. For tens of thousands of years, we shared the same landscapes, sometimes even the same caves. So why are we the only ones left?
Here's where most people get it wrong.
It wasn't a clear victory. Neanderthals were strong, resourceful, and had brains as big as ours, sometimes bigger. They made tools, buried their dead, and may have painted on cave walls. Denisovans left us almost no fossils, but a lot of genetic surprises. Modern Tibetans' high-altitude genes come from them. Here's the twist. We didn't always outcompete them. Sometimes, we just got lucky. Take the weather. Around 40,000 years ago, Earth's climate flipped from freezing to wildly unpredictable. Neanderthals were built for stability. Thick bodies, narrow diets. Not a recipe for sudden change. Homo sapiens. We were the original generalists. Eat anything, live anywhere, make it up as we go. When the world got weird, we didn't panic. We innovated. But the real secret wasn't just tools. It was how we survived together. Early sapiens built social networks bigger than any other human species, sometimes spanning hundreds of miles. If a tribe starved, distant cousins could help. If a disaster struck, knowledge could travel fast. This web of connection let us weather the chaos, literally. Meanwhile, Neanderthals stayed local, living and dying with their small bands. But if you think we just out-cooperated them, hold on. The story's not that neat. There's evidence we sometimes interbred with Neanderthals and Denisovans. In fact, if you're not African, you carry their genes right now. But this isn't a happy family reunion. Those genes are leftovers, proof our ancestors met, mixed, and then moved on. Most people never realize the genes we kept from Neanderthals aren't always good news. Some boost our immune system, but others raise the risk of depression, allergies, and even COVID severity. So we didn't just defeat our cousins, we absorbed bits of them and their baggage. Here's the part that gets personal. If we're the only human species left, what does that say about us? Our survival wasn't just a victory. It was a dangerous gamble on change itself. Unlike Neanderthals, we embraced risk. New foods, new lands, even new diseases. Most species avoid novelty. Humans chase it. That's our superpower and our Achilles heel. It let us spread across the world, but also brought plagues, wars, and ecological disasters. We survived by being adaptable, not invincible, a trait that could still backfire. But back to our big question, what finally finished off the others? It wasn't just one thing. The climate shifted, food vanished, and competition with us, sometimes violent, often indirect, tipped the scales. Some Neanderthals may have simply faded into our gene pool. Others starved or succumbed to diseases we brought. Denisovans? We only know their story from DNA, but the pattern is similar. Outnumbered, outlasted, and finally, out of time. The weirdest part, our own numbers almost crashed too.
Genetic evidence suggests Homo sapiens nearly went extinct.
More than once. At one point, our entire species may have shrunk to just a few thousand survivors. Why did we rebound while the others vanished? Here's the real kicker. We were built for crisis. Our bodies and brains evolved to improvise, collaborate, and try new things even when the odds looked terrible. But that same restless drive is why we sometimes invent our own disasters: environmental, social, even medical. In other words, we're the last human species because we're the most unpredictable. And unpredictable beats strong or smart every time the world throws a curveball. So the next time someone tells you humans are special because we're the most intelligent, remember, it's not that simple. We're here because we're weird, wired for risk, and sometimes just lucky.
And that risky edge is still shaping our lives,
From the foods we crave to the tech we invent. It's why we're brilliant, anxious, creative, and sometimes self-destructive, all at once. But there's one last twist you might not expect. Our dominance could be our downfall. We're the only human species left, but that means we now face every global risk alone. No backup, no cousins to fill our shoes if we stumble. So, what really happened to the others? They didn't just disappear. They became part of us, and their absence made us dangerously unique. We won the evolutionary lottery, but the prize is a future we have to navigate, without a safety net. And that risky streak, the one that saved us, might be the same one that tests us next. So, what's the real lesson? Our survival was never guaranteed, and still isn't. But that same restless drive that made us the last human standing could be the key to what comes next. If you want to know what happened when we first left Africa and how that journey shaped our bodies and minds forever, click over to our next deep dive. But let's rewind even further. Before the Neanderthals, before Denisovans, to the very first steps toward human at all.
early Homo species weren't guaranteed a future. They were a cosmic experiment in upright walking, tool-making, and social drama.
Some vanished almost as soon as they appeared. Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Indonesia, lasted barely long enough for us to notice. Others, like Homo erectus, stuck around for nearly 2 million years, far longer than we have so far. Here's a twist. Homo erectus was the first human to leave Africa, and it took them all the way to Indonesia. We're not the only explorers in the family. But every branch except ours eventually snapped. Why? The further they got from home, the more fragile their hold on survival became. The longer a human species survived, the more they had to adapt, or else. Species like Homo naledi, deep in South African caves, played by their own rules, burying their dead in total darkness, a mystery we still can't explain. So, extinction isn't rare. It's the default setting for our whole family. If you're feeling existential, here's a kicker. 99% of all species that ever lived are extinct. That makes our current monopoly feel less like destiny and more like borrowed time. But what actually happens when a species disappears? It leaves behind more than bones. It shapes the world for whoever comes next. Neanderthal extinction, for example, opened up new hunting grounds, new ideas, and new genetic combinations for us. But the more space we fill, the fewer options we leave for any future cousins or ourselves. The irony? Our greatest strength, our ability to adapt, could make us our own worst enemy. We can alter environments faster than any species before us, but we're still vulnerable to the same old forces: disease, disaster, and dumb luck. So, the ultimate lesson from our lost cousins is this: survival isn't about being the best, it's about being the best at changing. And changing doesn't always mean progress. Sometimes it's just rolling the dice and hoping for the best. But there's another overlooked clue in our survival story: the children. Human childhood is unusually long, longer than any other primate. Why does it matter? Long childhood means more time to learn, adapt, and bond. It's evolution's way of betting on flexibility. But it's risky. More years means more chances for disaster. Only a social animal can pull it off. The result? Our brains soak up culture, language, and survival tricks, but only if the group holds together. Lose that social glue, and the whole experiment collapses. That's a lesson baked into our DNA. So, in a way, our species is always one bad generation away from disaster. But every challenge we faced, from saber-toothed cats to volcanic winters, was also a test of how well we could raise the next generation. It's no accident that storytelling, art, and music all exploded as soon as humans spread out. Culture was our survival gear. And the weirdest part, The more creative we got, the more unpredictable and resilient we became. That's why you can trace a line from the first lullaby to the latest meme. Our brains are wired for sharing ideas, not just genes. So, when you scroll through your feed, you're living proof of the same survival trick that saved us in the Ice Age. But there's one more risky habit we haven't talked about: our tendency to form huge, interconnected societies. No other human species built networks this big. Neanderthals topped out at a few dozen in a group. That sounds like an advantage, but it's a double-edged sword. More people means more innovation, but also more conflict, more disease, more chaos. We invented cities and then spent centuries learning how not to destroy them. Our ancestors survived by improvising, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes disastrously. That improvisation is why we're still here, but also why we're always a step away from the next big mess. So, next time you hear about the end of history, remember, for humans, history is the story of surviving our own mistakes. Our past is littered with close calls and improbable recoveries. That's why, if you're betting on the future, never count out the weird, restless, risk-prone animal that is us.